Welcome back to another episode of Ingrid's World. On this episode, you will meet a senior mortgage consultant who will make us think before we say, "I'll buy that." She'll tell us how to keep, maintain, and repair our credit. And our last guest is our Ingrid's World youth correspondent who will give us her perspective on savings, allowances, and how she plans to use money in the future. I'm sure she will surprise you about some of her thoughts on credit. Now, let's welcome to the show Kathy Welsh, Senior Mortgage Consultant with Prosperity Home Mortgage. Welcome to the show, Kathy.
Thank you so much, Ingrid. I appreciate your having me.
Well, it's so good to talk to you. People got really excited about talking about credit. So let's start with the credit score. What is a credit score?
Well, in simple terms, a credit score is just a snapshot in time that tells a lender or any other creditor how risky you are in terms of them lending you credit.
Now, how do I get to, let's say, what is part of that credit, that personal history? How do they figure that out?
Well, there's a number of things that go into determining your credit. The biggest thing that goes into it is your payment history.
Ooh.
So that may be an obvious thing, but they want to see if you've been paying your bills on time. So 35% of your score is actually determined by whether or not you paid your bills on time.
Right, okay. And then what's another aspect? Are there any other aspects that makes up your credit?
Absolutely. Having a variety of credit is important. And what I mean by that is revolving credit, which would be like credit cards, installment credit, which would be like loans, for example, having an auto loan, and showing that variety. Also, the age of the credit is important. So if the credit cards you have are only a few months old, it's not as good as if you've had them for a number of years and you've established and shown that you can pay them back over a longer period of time.
Very interesting. So now, you said the payment history is very important. What can kind of like hurt your credit score?
Well, certainly not paying your bills on time is something that can hurt your credit score, and that's called derogatory credit.
Oh, so what's derogatory credit?
It just means anything that's listed on your credit report that's considered bad.
Okay.
So not paying on time, being sent to a collection agency, having a tax lien against you, those would all be considered derogatory credit.
So let's say I am a college student and I got a cell phone, and sometimes I can pay it and sometimes I don't quite pay it. Maybe I double up next month. How's that going to affect my credit?
Well, if you don't pay bills on time and they're more than 60 days old, it's very common for a creditor to report you to the credit agency.
Wow.
And that would be considered derogatory credit. So if you are going to have trouble paying your bills on time, the most important thing you can do is to call and be in contact with that creditor and not ignore the fact that you can't pay it on time.
Wow, oh my goodness. So that would be really, a real factor of it. You mentioned about the length of time about it. What's an ideal length of time?
More than 2 years is ideal. So beyond 2 years is even better, but having established credit for at least 2 years is good. And so that's why a lot of times, even when people are young, I suggested to them that it's important to get a credit card so they can start establishing that history.
Makes sense. I loved the slides that you gave me because one of the slides that you had was in terms of the credit scores and what do they actually mean. So when you look at that score, what's like the ideal, the great score that we should all try to work towards?
Anything above 740. So the range of credit scores is from 300 up to 850. It would be pretty difficult to have a score on either end of the spectrum, but the score that everybody wants to shoot for is a score of 740 or higher. And if your score is above that, then for example, if you come to get a home mortgage, which is what I do, then any program is available to you and you get the best interest rate that's available because you're considered to be a very good risk.
Okay, and then any interest rate. Oh my goodness, so it'll even drive the interest that you would have to pay on a loan.
Exactly. So your credit score tells us whether you're a good risk, and if you are a good risk, meaning your score is above 740, it means that you get the best rate that's available.
Makes sense. Now, what can I do if I've gotten myself in a lot of trouble, and especially with this economy, people who normally, had, wonderful jobs and everything else, there have been some hiccups here, and they they're back on track, have a job now, and trying to repair their credit. What suggestions do you have for them?
Well, the number one thing is to start paying your bills on time. And if you can't pay off an entire bill, for example, a credit card bill, at least make the minimum payment on the bill. And if you're having difficulty, be in contact with the creditor rather than ignoring it, so that you can work out a payment plan for you and they aren't reporting that you're not paying it. Some of the biggest offenders that I found in terms of hurting people's credit are very simple things. Even people that think they have good credit don't realize that by doing little things like not paying a $20 doctor's bill, they often will get reported to a credit agency and they don't even realize it, and it can be very damaging.
Wow.
Other things are discontinuing a cell phone plan and not paying the remaining balance, or switching cable companies and not returning the box that they have. Just little things that people don't think about. If you just pay attention to detail, you can improve your score more easily than you think.
Okay, so now you really have me convinced. Okay. All right, the $20 can get you in trouble. Okay, that's important to know. Tell me one other thing. How can I check? I mean, I want to check my credit score and see where I'm at. How can I do that?
That's a great question. So I have a website that I refer a lot of my clients to. It's called creditkarma.com.
Okay.
And it's CREDITKARMA. Okay. And what I love about that website is it will actually show you 2 of your true credit scores. So you can have an idea exactly where you stand. There are other websites where you can get your credit report once a year at no charge, and those will show you if you have problems on your credit report, but they won't show you what your scores are. And I think knowing what your score is important, and creditkarma.com is the only website I'm aware of that can show you that.
Is it free?
It is free.
Oh my God.
And better than being free, it's not only free, but when you go and look at your credit score on there, it doesn't result in a pull against your credit, so it doesn't damage your credit.
That's another thing someone said to me. They said, well, if you keep checking, it really can, work against you.
Yes, if you have creditors pulling your score, so for example, you tried to get a number of credit cards in a single year, or you tried to get an auto loan several times a year, or you went to a bunch of mortgage companies and they all continued to pull your credit. Having those, what we call hard pulls, can be damaging to your score, so you need to be careful. But creditkarma.com is a soft pull, meaning it doesn't count against you, and so that's one of the things I really like about it.
Soft pull. I like how that sounds. No, it's really important. So, all right, so we have those different things, and okay, so let me just ask you a couple questions, because you did a presentation to my Rotary Club, and it was so fascinating. So one of the questions are consolidating debt. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? If I want to get everything together and then do that, is that a good thing for my credit?
Well, if you have a credit card and you have more than 50% of your limit charged on that card, it can have a damaging effect to your credit score. So it's important to know what your limit is and to make sure that the amount that you have charged on there is less than the limit. So if by consolidating credit, you're putting all of your debt onto a single credit card and bringing it closer to its maximum, it can actually damage your score. So in many cases, consolidating credit is not a good thing to do.
Wow. All right, I'm going to tell you a real life story. Okay, it's mine. All right, so I had credit cards, real young mother, blah, 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 blah. Okay, and I was like, I'm so done with these credit cards. So I sent them the money, and then I called them up and said, you know what, I like to close that account. I don't need this credit card anymore. So I said, like, it's so crazy to do that. Was that a good thing?
It wasn't a good thing.
Ooh, I was afraid you were going to say that.
So one of the things that helps your credit score is they look at how much credit you have available to you.
Okay.
And so by closing that account, you were reducing the amount of credit that you had available. So if you don't want to use a card anymore, you're actually better off sticking it in a drawer and not using it, or cutting it up and not using it. But by closing the account, you're reducing the amount of credit you have available, which can in fact damage your score.
She asked me several times, do you really want to close this account? And I'm like, yes, I paid it off, and so close it.
Yeah, the one exception that I would say is if you're paying a high fee to have that card, then it would probably make sense to close it. But in general, if you're not paying a fee for a credit card, you're better off either hiding it away so you don't use it, or cutting it up, but closing it is not recommended.
Great advice. Okay, so now what about, one last question, because it's Ingrid's world, so I got to ask you this other question for myself. If my bank calls, we would like you to get this credit card because you qualify for our rewards program, da 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 da. And I usually say no. What do you think about something like that?
Well, I would think it would depend on, again, the amount of credit that you already have. So it is good to have a certain amount of credit available, and if you're someone that is just starting to establish their credit, it may be a good idea for them to get an additional card. On the other hand, if you already have plenty of credit available and you already have a good score, I personally prefer not to have as many credit cards because I feel managing them is more difficult when you have a lot of them. So it depends on your situation.
Advice.
If you only have one card, I think it's better to have more than one, and it might make sense to open it, but if you already have plenty of credit established, then there's really no reason to get an additional one.
So, piece of advice for our viewers, and certainly me, of how we're proceeding now with our credit. And the economy seems like it's picking up. Gas is a great price now. What advice do you have for people now?
Just in terms of credit? Well, I personally think that it's good to pay all of your credit cards off every month if you possibly can, because the interest rate on them is quite high. But using that credit is a good idea because it helps you establish credit, shows you're responsible and can pay them off. So I think using credit but paying it all off on time would be my best advice, because it's the best way to save yourself money in the long run.
You're quite right about that. I figured that out, and I looked at it, I'm like, wow, you know what? Zero interest, that you're paying, and that's like money in your pocket.
Exactly.
Because you haven't like doubled the price of the item, whatever you're buying. So,
exactly.
Little things like that. Are there any ways, let's say, if, children in college and I'm trying to get them started, are there ways that I, as a parent, can help them?
Well, what I did when my children went to college was I went to the credit union where they had an account, and the bank did not want to give them a card by themselves, so I co-signed with them and got them a credit card, and I got them a limit high enough so that they could pay for their books and had an emergency.
Oh, nice.
And so every semester they'd charge their books and pay them off, and so it allowed them to start establishing credit early on, so that when they were out of college, they were in a position to be able to get a car loan if they needed it, or other credit cards.
Oh my goodness, so they can actually start it ahead of time like that. A lot of young people, my friends will tell me that they're like student unions, and they already have a table set up with the major credit cards, and they're hitting the students like that. But your way is very smart to do something like that.
I think college is a good time for students to become responsible, and certainly some students are more responsible than others, and you don't want your child to get themselves into a problem where they can't repay the amount they've charged. But it is a good time, I think, for them to start taking responsibility and to start using credit if you feel they can handle it.
Wonderful, wonderful. And So do you really use primarily credit for, mainly, should you really say, do they look at the items that you're buying, or is it for, or can I just say, I really want to use this for major purchases? Or are they just simply looking at the bottom dollar?
They just look at the bottom line. And yeah, so I would like to bring up one other point that's a misconception.
Yes.
Sometimes people say, I use my debit card. And it's important to know that a debit card does not help you establish credit because you're simply taking the money directly out of your account. You're not borrowing it and then paying it back. So that's the difference between a credit card and a debit card. So a debit card is a way to make purchases, but it's not a way to establish credit.
Didn't know that. So I thought if you had a debit card, that's great because you're really improving your credit, but it's not.
Well, I mean, it is a good way, but it's not helping you establish credit.
Oh, what another good thing. Yeah, you're learning. My goodness.
So in terms of big purchases, the only thing I would say is, I mentioned that I like the idea of paying off my credit card every month. So when you make those big purchases, you're going to want to know that you're going to have a bigger amount to pay off. But the good news is you don't have to pay the whole thing off in that given month. So if you need a little help, you want to at least make your minimum payment.
Ah, that makes sense. Well, as we, move forward to a stronger economy, it's very important to really understand how credit really works. And I think that that's some of the misconceptions. You see the advertisements on television, you say, oh, go ahead and, I think now the commercials, follow the green road. and I'm like, okay, what does that really mean?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's different ways to establish it. That's really. Any other advice that any other misconceptions that you see that are out there? No, just pointing out some of the biggest offenders, which I've mentioned. One I didn't mention is parking tickets. A lot of times you might get a parking ticket and not think a lot about it and not worry about paying it back. But you should know that parking tickets are reported to collection agencies very quickly, so it's not a good idea to rip it up and forget about it. No way. So I can't just go, stupid people.
Sometimes it's the little ones that'll really get you.
Oh my goodness. Oh my word. So if you get a ticket, pay it off right away.
Exactly. And the other advice is it's not necessarily the size of the bill that you don't pay back, because even a $10 bill that you don't pay that gets sent to a credit agency can be as damaging as a larger bill. So just think that, I only owe them $10, it doesn't matter. Don't think that that one's not going to hurt you, because even the small ones can hurt you if they get reported to a credit agency.
Wow, that's fascinating. Yeah, because that's what it's all about, is really knowing how credit cards work, and then how to keep our score good.
Exactly.
Because that's what's most important. The other aspect of it that, makes me, worry sometimes is that what happens if when I review my credit, history and I see an error? How do you fix something like that?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's not that easy, but if you do have an error, the way to do it is to start by writing a letter to the credit agencies and explaining the error, and they will ask for documentation to back up that something is on there erroneously.
Okay. All right.
So there is a process to have your credit corrected. It's not always an easy thing to do, but if you do see an error, I think it's important to have it corrected so that you know that your credit's as good as it can possibly be.
Wow. Kathy, you're wonderful. I've learned a lot. In fact, I'm going to watch this show myself and take notes. Thanks again for being on the show, Kathy.
Oh, thank you, Ingrid.
Coming up next, we will be talking to Isis Wallace, Ingrid's World Youth Correspondent. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Ingrid's World. I'm your host, Ingrid Paris Hicklin. Now let's welcome to the show, Isis Wallace. Well, Isis, how you doing?
Good.
So this whole show is about credit cards and credit and money. I have a couple questions I need to ask you. Do you have an allowance or do you get money?
Yes.
You do? Okay. Do you save money?
Yes.
So how do you save your money, Isis?
Whenever I get my money, I put it in my piggy bank.
Really? Okay. Now, when did you start saving?
I started saving like when I was in second grade.
Second grade. You weren't tempted to kind of, let's say, like buy stuff with it?
No.
Go shopping?
No.
Ooh, you must be really strong about saving your money. So tell me, what's your tips on saving? When you get tempted, how do you stay strong and don't buy anything?
Well, I save up my money, and then when it's time to buy something very expensive, I have the money for it.
Ooh, so what kinds of things have you been buying with the money that you've saved?
I've bought a race car, a really expensive race car remote control.
Ooh, really?
Yes.
So it was a remote control, and that would be something that you normally would never get?
No, because it costs a lot of money.
Oh my gosh, all right. So you do that. And then what other things have you bought? So you bought a remote control race car.
And I've bought myself a Furby.
You got a Furby? Oh my goodness, that's really nice. So that's another good thing. Now, do people ever try to borrow money from you?
No.
Oh, good, good. Do you know anything about credit?
Yes, credit is when you have like a credit card and you use your credit card to get something and then the money comes to them later.
Okay, so all right. Do you think that you'll ever have a credit card?
Yes.
You will? Oh my goodness. And what were you planning to use it for?
Like if I needed to buy a car, then I would use the credit card so I could get the money to them later.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you're already thinking. So I like what you're saying. So you're going to be using it for big purchases and not, let's say, Starbucks coffee.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Good, good, good. And what other things are you going to be doing for the future when it comes to your credit? Are you going to be real careful?
Yes.
Ah, all right. So what's your advice to, let's say, children who are your age? Do you have any advice about that? Because it seems like you know how to save.
I think they should, whenever they get money from their birthday or allowance, keep it somewhere safe so you don't lose it. So then when you want to buy that toy you've been waiting for, then you can buy it.
Oh my goodness, that's like so smart. All right, well, you hitting it all. Any advice for adults?
Adults should save their money so they can pay off their taxes and their bills.
I love it. Okay. Well, thank you, Isis Wallace, for being on the show. You're wonderful as always.
Thank you for having me.
You're certainly welcome. Thank you, viewers, for watching Ingrid's World. Please don't forget to like us on Facebook or see ingridsworld.org for the broadcast schedule of Ingrid's World. Thanks for watching. I would like to thank I Am Solutions, LLC, for underwriting this episode of Ingrid's World. I Am Solutions, LLC provides capacity building for small businesses, HBCUs, and technology development and executive coaching. Their business purpose is philanthropic economics, doing good in the community while doing well as a company. They are located at 2121 Eisenhower Avenue, Suite 200, Alexandria, Virginia. And you can reach them at 703-818-0859, or you can visit their website, which is www.imsolutionsllc.com.